The storm came down the canyon like a throat closing. Wind scraped the stone and filled the air with needles of ice. Snow rode the gusts in hard sheets, not soft flakes. It stung eyes, skinned cheeks, and hissed along the river ice like a saw. The land hunted that night. It hunted with cold, with noise, with white blindness. Harlan Webb felt the way a rabbit must feel when an owl's shadow passes. He pulled his scarf higher, but the cold bit through wool and through skin. Beside him, the big gray warhorse blew steam and shook his mane. The gelding's ears went back, then forward. Something moved ahead in the white. He saw a lantern first, a candle in a jar, swinging low, barely alive. Then a pack mule. Then a woman on foot, her dress ragged at the hem, her hands roped in front of her. A boy stumbled beside her, clutching the rope with his small fingers to take some of the pull. The mule slid, and the woman slipped. She hit the ice on her knees and did not cry out. She just breathed a broken sound and stood again. Harlan's mouth went dry. The river ice beneath them groaned. He felt it under his boots. He felt it through the horse's iron shoes. The canyon narrowed ahead, a throat with teeth. "Hold," Harlan said to the horse. The wind stole the word. He turned the gray sideways to cut the gusts from the woman and boy. When the lantern swung, he saw her face. Young, wind-burned, eyes set the way a person's get when there is nothing left to sell but pain. "Name," he called. "Lark," she said. "Lark Ellison. This is Tom." Her lips were cut from cold. The boy grit his teeth and nodded once. A rifle glinted up canyon. Just a wink through the white. Harlan didn't raise his head to look longer. "You look, you get marked." He kept his eyes on the ice, on the edges where dark water showed like the pupil of a bad eye. The river's voice deepened. The lantern light found a line of hoof prints burned into snow. Fresh, heavy, branded horse, shod in the crooked style of the Double V Syndicate. Not just any men behind them. Deacon Stroud's riders. Debt buyers in dust years. Flesh buyers in lean ones. "Easy," Harlan told the gray. He heard boot leather somewhere behind, and the smell of smoke under the clean cut of snow. He thought of the paper in Deacon Stroud's coat. He thought of the story folks in Las Amargosas told over weak coffee, that a man once traded a warhorse for a widow, and the price followed him like a shadow that would not step aside. The ice cracked under the mule. Lark lunged to catch the lead rope. Tom lunged too. The ice held by a scream of frozen water. Harlan slid from the saddle and grabbed the mule's halter. The gray danced, then stood square by Harlan's whistle. The storm snatched the sound away, yet the horse heard it. He always did. He was a captured horse, stamped as army property once. But he had the kind of ears that listened to a man's breath, not a brand. He shifted his weight and blocked. Wind for the woman and the boy. That's when the men above showed themselves. Figures in long dusters, hunched against the gale. One of them lifted an oilskin-wrapped ledger, as if it were a badge. Stroud's men did not always carry guns in front. They carried paper. Paper that said you belonged. "Walk careful," Harlan whispered. "The river is hungry." He did not look up. He did not need to. He could feel the aim on his neck. "Mr. Webb," a voice called from the rocks. "Your gray belongs to our books, and the widow belongs to our books. You can pay the one with the other. Be a gentleman and settle both." Lark's shoulders tightened. Tom's breath came like small knifings of air. Harlan kept his eyes on the ice line, where black showed like a slit in an old wound. He studied cast marks where snow had been pushed by hooves and frozen again. There were 2 sets of tracks headed up canyon and none back. The riders wanted him going forward into narrow ground. That meant a snare. He touched the gray's neck. The horse trembled under the hand. Not fear, holding. "Stroud's books burn quick," Harlan said to the ice, not to the men. "But the smoke hangs for years." "Then don't make more smoke," the voice replied. Bring the woman on. Bring the boy. Leave the horse. The lantern swung. In that swing, Harlan saw something small, bright on Lark's wrist. A narrow band of beads, ugly with mud and ice, but old. Turquoise in 2 rows with a white shell center. Pattern set in a way he'd only seen out near Tochinlini years ago, when he was young enough to be stupid and lucky enough to survive it. A Diné pattern, a family mark, not a trade trinket. The wind cut again, and there was a whisper of leather on stone above them. A second rifle, maybe a third. Lark lifted her chin. Please, she said, quiet, not to beg, but to say time was short. Her eyes cut to the boy's feet and the river's black seams. Harlan's jaw clicked. He had a rule about winter rivers. He did not stop on them if he could help it. He did not talk on them if he could help it. But he did not leave people on them either. The gray's breath pumped like a bellows. Tom's small fingers had gone blue around the rope. In the snow noise, a lower sound came. A single hoarse snort, then a tongue click. Calm, careful, spaced. A way a man talks to a horse with breath and tongue, and not much else. Harlan felt the gray lean one ear toward that click like a compass finding north. Down, Harlan said softly to Lark and Tom. On your bellies. Slide. Don't step. He saw them nod and stretched his arm to cover them. The ice moaned again. He led with his palm, then his elbow, feeling the cold bite through wool. The mule scrambled and then was urged gently by that soft clicking from the white. Calm, calm. The mule's breathing slowed. The gray followed Harlan with the kind of careful he ought to have been born with and had since learned. A shape broke the white to their left. A rider without a hat, hair bound back. A long, lean face, frost caught in the eyebrows. He lifted his hands from the reins to show empty palms. He rode a dun mare with a raven tail. The mare's ears flicked and settled at the click of his tongue. Ya'ater, the man said, a greeting from farther west, and his voice held a calm that did not belong to storms. Do not stand. Do not speak loud. The river carries words. He slid from his saddle and stepped light, feeling with the edge of his boot before putting weight. He looked at Lark. He looked at the boy. He looked at Harlan's gray with quiet eyes that could read a horse the way some men read the sky. Bidzi Nez, Harlan said. He had not seen the Diné horseman in 2 winters. He had not expected to see him again. You pick bad nights to show. Bad nights pick us, Bidzi said. His cheekbone bore an old scar in a crescent. His coat was patched with a strip of war shirt leather at the shoulder, smooth from use. A small medicine pouch hung at his neck, tight and plain, not for show. He lifted his chin toward the rocks above. Stroud's riders, he said. They are like coyotes. Talk first, bite after. One of Stroud's men shouted, angry that his voice now had to share the canyon. That Diné has no book with us. He can go. The rest stay. Bidzi's mouth twitched like he might smile, and then remembered what night it was. He crouched by Lark and slipped his knife under the rope at her wrists. He did not cut yet. He looked her in the eye first, asking without speaking. She nodded once. He cut. The blade moved so clean it made no sound. Lark's hands flared red as blood came back. Tom flinched at the feeling and then grabbed his mother's shoulder, squeezing it like an anchor. The ice boomed deep below, a belly sound. The storm threw more white. Step here, Bidzi said, showing a line that was not a line, but a series of dull spots where the ice held better. The river froze from the sides. The middle is a liar. He led them toward a tongue of gravel, where tamarisk shook like wet cats. Harlan eased the gray and the mule in that direction, angling to make their weight wide. Above, a rifle cracked. The shot hit the river with a spit of black water that froze again on the edges like glass. It was not meant to hit. It was meant to hurry. Your horse. Bidsy said to Harlan without looking at him, "is not yours." Harlan felt something cold that had nothing to do with the storm. "I pulled him from a boxcar in Amarillo 3 years back," he said. "Army had him stamped and half-starved. I paid with a winter's work." Bidsy touched the gray's cheek where a patch of hair grew in a whirl like a whirlpool. He pressed gently, and the horse sighed through his nose. "He was ridden by my brother," Bidsy said, voice flat. "Before the army cut his mane and stamped his hip. My brother was not stamped. He was shot." The men above burned the paper that would say so. A second rifle spoke, closer. Snow leaped from a boulder by Harlan's boot. The gray shook. Harlan put his palm to the horse's neck and pressed down again. The horse stilled, like a thought that chooses not to grow teeth. Lark's breath made 2 white streams. Tom's hat had slipped to one side and was now frozen in that shape. "Books burn quick," Harlan repeated, quiet. Bidsy's eyes slid to Lark's wrist. "The bead band," he said. "Whose hand made it?" "My husband's sister," Lark said. "She married into your people near Canyon de Chelly. She sent it with a letter. Years ago." Her voice shook, but it did not wobble. "The letter said there would come a day when men would use paper to steal lives. It told me where to go for help." "Names," Harlan said, and at once felt the canyon hear him. He swallowed. "Do not say them," he added fast, and Lark gave a tiny nod. The Diné had a way of not saying the names of the dead. The night was heavy with things you did not say. Bidsy lifted the mule's lead and made the click again. The mule moved like he finally believed the ice would let him. They made the gravel tongue and crouched behind scrub that rattled in the gale. The land gave them a breath. Harlan dared to look up. Stroud's men were silhouettes along the rim, oilskins slicked with ice. One of them had the ledger under his coat now. He would keep it dry if he had to use his own body for a roof. "Deacon!" Harlan shouted, voice low but aimed at the rocks as if the canyon's throat would carry it. "You send me paper in spring. I'll answer in spring. Tonight I move the woman and the boy. Tonight you pay," Stroud answered, and now Harlan could place him by the sound. He was on the left, near a slab that looked like a sleeping bison. "You pay with that gray." "Not a hard ask, Harlan. He's just a horse. The widow's just a widow. The boy is small. Paper says so." "Paper lies," Tom said suddenly, and then bit his lip as if the words had jumped without permission. Silence from above, the kind that moves. Boots on rock. Someone shifting position to see the boy who dared talk like a man. "Tom," Lark whispered, pulling him close. "Do not answer ghosts. They like it." "Not ghosts," Tom said into her coat. "Men. I can smell their tobacco." Bidsy reached to the boy and set 2 fingers on his shoulder. Light. A touch that spoke a promise. He said a line in his own tongue, brief and almost too soft to be heard. "The wind hears fools first." Then, in English, for Harlan, "We move. The canyon narrows ahead and then opens. They will try to shape us like water through a gate. We go before their gate is closed." "How many?" Harlan asked. "Enough," Bidsy said. He glanced once at the ledger man, but not 100. Stroud does not waste men on snow. Stroud wastes everything but his own skin, Lark said under her breath. Harlan saw rope marks on her wrists now that blood had returned. They were deep and ridged. He saw, too, a faint burned crescent on the inside of her left forearm. It was old and pale, a half-moon-shaped brand a man might make, with a heated horseshoe nail, to mark something not animal. Secrets in scars. He filed it in his mind without letting his eyes linger. They moved. No words now. Just breath and snow, and the scrape of leather. The gray tucked his chin and followed Harlan's steps like a shadow, choosing the same path. The mule snorted and kept his ears pinned to Bidsy's tongue clicks. Lark bent low, keeping her hands under Tom's arms when the ice wavered. Twice they felt the river shift. Once they saw black, long and thin, race out from under their boots like a snake. Harlan's fingers went numb inside his gloves. He did not look up. He did not look back, only forward to a bend where the canyon walls fell away to a wider basin of cottonwoods and low sage. The land eased, then turned cruel again. The canyon's mouth funneled wind so hard, it pressed them sideways. A cottonwood cracked like a gun and lost a limb the size of a wagon tongue. It missed Lark's head by the breadth of a breath. Tom's hat flew and was gone. He made a sound like he might chase it. Lark held him tight. They reached a hummock of sand set with prairie glass and broken bones of old cotton roots. Bidsy raised a hand, and they crouched in its lee. The gray and the mule stood with their rears to the wind, heads low, steam pluming. Above, the silhouettes shifted again. Stroud was not in a hurry. Predators are patient when weather does the work. "Why do they want you?" Harlan asked Lark, voice low enough to be a thought. "Paper, you said." "Debt," she said. "My husband took feed and iron on a long credit. Said he would settle at branding time. He died before spring. Stroud said a widow answers a dead man's account. He said paper didn't care what you call yourself." She touched the bead band at her wrist, almost without noticing. "He showed me a ledger line with my name. He showed me a brand mark, too. He said the horse we rode that day was his by that brand. He said he could take the horse, or take me, or take both. Then he set his ledger by the stove to dry from the rain. A page burned. The line with the brand." She stopped. Her lips shook with anger now, not cold. The burned place matched the line he wanted. Harlan's back prickled. He smelled the night's lie, and it smelled like wet ash under snow. "My brother," Bidsy said, voice still. He rode a gray with a long back and a breath that steadied the way a hand can steady a horse that wants to run too hard. He wore a leather strip with a carved notch under the saddle to mark him when brands lie. The army shot him near Laguna Station for riding what paper said was not his. Stroud's man took the leather knot and the horse. Paper burned. Men did not. Bidsy touched the gray's wither, right at the point of the saddle's rear. He slid his fingers along the sweat line and found a hard bump sewn under the pad. He cut it loose with his knife. A small strip of leather came free, dark with old sweat and salt. A notch had been carved in it, 2 short lines crossing one long, the way Diné men sometimes mark a family thing. He held it to the lantern light. Harlan felt the ground shift, though it did not. "Now," Bidsy said softly, not to the night, not to the men above, to himself, to his brother maybe. "Now we carry 2 truths." A rifle cracked again, and this time it was not warning. The shot took the lantern jar, and the light died, leaving only storm. Snow filled the dark like static. The world went smaller. Sound grew larger. Men shouted above, voices blown thin. "Run or trade, Mr. Webb." Stroud's voice came again, closer now, as if he had climbed down. "I am a patient man, but winter is an impatient bookkeeper." Harlan breathed through his nose, slow, steady. He looked at the gray, at Bidsy, at Lark and Tom. He saw the small bead band and the leather notch. He saw the path ahead, a black maw closing or opening. He could not tell which. "We move east to the Cottons," Bidsy said. "There is a wash with sand under the snow. It will hide our weight." He pointed with his chin, because hands were for horses now. "They will come down the rim and try to cut across open. The wind will blind them if we stay low. We'll be slow with the mule," Harlan said. "The mule is faster than paper," Bidsy answered, and that almost smile ghosted his mouth and then died again. He checked the small medicine pouch at his throat, pressed it once, and then forgot it. They slid into the wash. The snow there was less, caught by sage roots. Their boots hit sand that shifted but held. The gray shook and then broke into a careful trot, head low, trusting the footing he could feel. The mule followed with ears back, resentful but willing. The wash curved like a snake that had eaten and now slept. It took them east and a little north. It took them under a deadfall where crows huddled like knots of burned cloth. It took them near a cotton stand where bark had been peeled long ago by someone who knew how to take medicine without killing the tree. Bidsy's eyes flicked to that place and then away, a small nod to old care. Harlan kept count in his head. Steps, breaths, heartbeats between cracks overhead and their own. Micro things held a man together in a night like this. He felt the tick of a clock he could not see. He smelled a change in the air, a hint of wet that was not snow. Water opened somewhere ahead. He raised a hand, and the gray slowed. "Listen," he said. They all did. The storm hissed and groaned. Somewhere a branch ground against another, and under it, a thin sound, like a song made small. Open water, singing in a cut. "The wash drops," Bidsy said. "A cut. Bank. If we fall, we will not climb out fast. Stroud will be above at the lip." "How far?" Lark asked. Her voice had gone hoarse. Tom leaned against her hip, moving because she moved. 50 steps, Bidsy said. "Too far to jump, not far enough to stay." Harlan looked at the gray. The horse's ears moved like he was counting too. He remembered the first day he saw him in that rail yard. He remembered how the horse watched a freight wagon roll by and did not startle. He remembered how the horse had stood all day, saving himself, not fighting nothing he could not beat. He was a war horse, not because he loved fighting, but because he knew when to hold and when to burn. "Stroud will press," Harlan said. "He will say the word trade again. He will point that ledger like a gun, and there's a truth tucked under our saddle that makes the trade a lie." Bidsy nodded once. "We do not trade people," he said, speaking a vow like it was a line cut into rock. "Not for paper, not for horses, not for anything that burns." His eyes went to the gray again. "We keep what is true. We return what is stolen." Lark's shoulders eased for the first time since they met her on the ice. She tucked Tom's head under her chin. "Then we run for the cottons," she said. "We run and we don't look back." They ran, as much as people can run in a night like that. The wash led them to the lip of the cut, a drop of 4 man-heights, into a black ribbon of water and smooth stones, rimed with ice. The wind funneled down and tried to peel them off the edge. Harlan's boot sent a sheet of crust skittering into the drop. It shattered below like thin glass and sang a little. Tom's hand found Harlan's coat and held. Voices came now from behind and above. Stroud's men were in the wash. Their oilskins hissed like snakes in the snow. The ledger man kept the book wrapped. Another carried a rope. Another had a small branding iron in a sack, a thing for marking not just cattle. Stroud did not always need to say what kind of mark he planned. You could smell it in the way he kept iron, even in a storm. "There," Bidsy said, pointing at a place where cotton roots held sand like fingers. "We can climb. We can drop on the other side. Then we cut through willow." The gray snorted. Harlan touched his neck. "You first," he said to Bidsy. "Take the mule and the boy. Lark and I will bring the horse and follow." Bidsy did not argue. He took Tom's hand, wrapped it in his big, warm palm, and set the boy's feet where they should go. He made the click. The mule sighed and came. They went over the lip and vanished, sliding into white, and then into the dark shadow of the far bank. Lark stood with Harlan, breath smoking, eyes on the edge. "Trade the horse," Stroud's voice called. Closer now, echoed by the cut like a priest's voice in a stone church. "Bring me the gray, Harlan, and walk away. Leave the woman. Leave the boy. Your hands will be clean." Lark's mouth trembled with a laugh that wasn't amused. "They never learn," she said. "How it sounds to say a woman like she's a chair." Harlan set his hand on the gray's mane. "We're going," he told the horse. You hold with me." He turned to Lark. "You ready?" She nodded once. The wind took her hair and wrapped it across her face like a black scarf. She brushed it back, and in that instant, Harlan saw her eyes. Full, fierce, showing a line of steel that winter could not snap. They went over the lip. The sand held, then slid. Harlan felt the gray gather and lean, controlled as a rope man easing weight. Lark dug her heels, found a root, moved, found another. Snow filled collars and boots. The cut sang with the sound of water and ice. Above them, Stroud's men reached the lip, and their voices grew loud and ugly. A shot hit the sand by Harlan's boot, and cold dirt sprayed his face. He kept his eyes on the Gray's shoulder and on the next handhold. He did not look up. On the far bank, Bidsy reached for Tom and pulled him the last hand's width. He tied the mule quick to a root and leaned long to catch Lark's wrist. He did not pull hard. He matched her weight and used it. She came up like a person who had built fences and drove posts and knew what her body weighed in work. Harlan gave the Gray the room he needed and then leaped the last distance, landing in a crouch. The Gray slid beside him, iron cutting a groove in the sand, and then stood, blowing, head high, looking for the next thing to do. They ran again. Willow slapped their faces. Snow filled the stems and dumped down collars as if it were a living thing that wanted inside. The wash curved and then widened into a place where the wind had scoured the ground to naked sand and scattered stones. A cottonwood there carried a mark on its skin, a long vertical scar healed smooth, and beside it a small cross-cut shallow. Not a grave, a sign. Harlan's skin crawled. He did not know the sign. Bidsy saw it, and his eyes changed in a way Harlan had seen once before at a corral when a new horse showed the wrong kind of white in his eye. "What?" Harlan asked. "Ute," Bidsy said. "Old dispute line. Not this winter, but not forgotten. We are between old teeth and new teeth both." "Do they watch this place?" Lark asked. She kept her voice even. Tom's eyes were wide, but not with the empty kind of fear. He was taking it all in and holding it like a boy who would later turn into a man and carry it right or wrong. "Not in this storm," Bidsy said, "but signs do not sleep. We will move with respect." He touched the scar on the tree lightly and made a small breath sound that was not a word. Harlan could not tell if it was a prayer or just a man making peace with a tree. They cut low along the cottons and then out to a longer run of open sand. The wind here had teeth that found any gap in clothing and bit. Their faces burned where ice melted. Their knees hurt where they had hit ice earlier. Harlan kept a hand on the Gray's neck when he could. The horse kept his head at Harlan's shoulder. The mule pulled, then stopped, ears pinned, and Harlan and Bidsy both turned without speaking. To the west, the storm thinned for a blink and showed the rim. 3 men came down a deer path. One had a rope coiled in his fist. One had the ledger slung across his back. The third had a small iron hooked on his belt. They moved with the slow confidence of men who believe a ledger is a gun that never misses. "We cannot outrun them in open," Bidsy said. "We need cover, and we need to teach them to slow." "The cotton stand ahead," Harlan said. "A tangle. We can vanish for a minute. Or trap ourselves," Lark said. "Traps work both ways," Harlan replied, and he felt the ground under his boots change from sand to hardpan. Prairie glass crunched. His mind made a picture of the 3 men triangulating, of the rest of Stroud's riders watching from the rim, of the cut they had just climbed, a throat they could be forced back into. He liked none of it. He liked one thing. The Gray's breath stayed even. The horse was not wasting himself on the storm. Neither was Bidsy. The cottons closed around them. Branches arced low, and summer's old leaves clung here and there, brown and rattling like dry tongues. The wind struck less, but the cold found a way. Harlan looked for sign. He saw a scrap of blue cloth caught on a twig, the faded color almost turquoise. He saw a small circle pressed in mud where a knee had knelt weeks ago. He saw a bead, tiny and white, half buried in sand. He stooped, brushed it free. It was shell, not glass. He handed it to Lark without a word. Her eyes flashed and then softened. She slipped it into the bead band at her wrist, where a gap had been, and it fit like a lost tooth, filling a smile. Behind them, a rope hissed through cold air. Harlan turned in time to see it fall. Bidsey stepped into it, not by mistake. He put his left wrist in the loop and let them pull, then twisted his body and stepped out again. The rope snapped back, and the man holding it fell hard on his back, breath blown out in a white sheet. The Iron Man swore. The ledger man put a hand on his book, as if to protect it from insult. "Enough," Stroud's voice said. And now he stood at the edge of the cottons, close enough for Harlan to see his beard, rimed with white. "You think yourself clever, Mr. Webb. You think DNA tricks, and a woman's stubbornness, change a debt." He looked at the gray. He did not look at the people long. "I will take the horse and the woman. The boy can carry my iron, and learn the value of work. Or I will take all three, and say the river did it. Your choice." Bidsey stood very still. Harlan could feel the stillness like he could feel a horse about to rear, the kind of stillness that makes a shape in the air. He knew Bidsey's wound. He knew it now, if he had not known it before. A brother shot over a horse, a ledger that lied, and a brand that lied louder. He could taste the choice here. Mercy and justice did not sit together tonight. They stared at each other with their hands on knives. Lark stepped forward. Her hands shook, but not with fear, with cold and rage braided. "You traded a war horse for a widow once, Deacon," she said. "You told men in the saloon it was smart business. You told them a woman is a debt you can ride. You forgot one thing. Honor doesn't come with a receipt." Stroud's eyes moved to her, as if she had spoken in a language he did not expect. He opened his mouth to answer. A horn sounded from the west. Not a bugle. A cow horn. Low, long, then cut. It came again. Closer. Harlan didn't move his eyes from Stroud, but he felt the sound in his bones. It was a gather call the ranchers used when a drift broke loose. It meant men. More men. Not Stroud's three. A handful at least. The storm had friends. Bidsey leaned in close enough for Harlan to hear his breath. "There is a place," he said. "A Hogan ruin under a bluff, old, dry. If we make it, the wind will pass over. We can buy a handful of hours." "Where?" Harlan asked. "Beyond the cottons, past the dead pinon, up a deer track with snow over it," Bidsey said. "But Stroud knows the deer track too." Stroud lifted a hand. The three men spread. The ledger man held the book like a small shield. The rope man swung the loop. The Iron Man smiled without his eyes. "We have something he wants," Lark said, voice a thread but strong. "Not me. Not the boy. Not just the horse. We have the truth of the notch." She touched the small leather strip Bidsey had cut from under the saddle. "We move toward the place that will let that truth stand up." "What place is that?" Harlan asked, though he thought he knew. "Where paper is not the only witness," Bidsey said. "Where tracks speak and brands are seen from the bone outward. Where men who know horses more than they know ledgers meet to say what is so. The trading yard at La Culebra. It is far. The storm is here. We will not reach it tonight. But if we live till noon, we can begin to ride." Stroud took a step closer. His boots sank and squeaked. "Choose," he said, warm now, as if they shared a table and coffee instead of a night and a knife. Harlan looked at Lark. He looked at Tom. He looked at Bidsey. He looked at the gray who had carried pieces of many men's stories and still stood ready. He thought of mercy and its cost. He thought of justice and its price. He thought of a way through where neither word was a lie. It would hurt, He felt the hurt coming like a storm behind the storm. "Deacon," he said, raising his hands empty, palms out. "You'll get your trade." Lark's breath hissed. Tom's hand gripped his mother's skirt. Bidsy did not move, but his eyes cut to Harlan sharp as a flake of obsidian. Harlan took the gray's rein and stepped forward 3 paces. He let the rope man see the loop of leather hanging loose from under the saddle, the notch like a secret that had waited too long. He did not lift it high. He did not show it as a flag. He let it be seen by eyes that could see. "I will trade the war horse," Harlan said. His voice did not crack, but not to you. Snow hissed between them. Stroud tilted his head like a dog trying to catch a tone. "I trade him to the man who owned him before your paper learned his name," Harlan said. He turned and placed the rein in Bidsy Nez's hand. "And I take the widow and the boy in return." The canyon took the words and made them larger. Stroud's face changed. One of the 3 laughed once, short and mean, then swallowed it when Stroud did not join him. The rope man's loop fell for a moment, like he had forgotten he held it. The Iron Man's hand hovered over his sack. Bidsy's fingers closed on the rein. He did not lift his chin in triumph. He did not make a sound. He looked at the gray, and then at Harlan. He nodded once, a soldier's nod, a brother's nod, a thing a war horse might understand. He said one line in his own tongue, a vow that did not need translating. "No one takes a widow by trade." Stroud smiled then. He showed a tooth that had been capped with gold in Santa Fe. It flashed in the stormlight like a coin. "That is not how books work," he said. "Books burn," Lark said, and the edge in her voice could cut rope. Stroud's smile slid away like grease in cold water. "Then we make new pages," he said, and lifted his hand. Men moved. The rope rose. The iron lifted. The ledger man tucked his book tight. The horn from the west sounded again, closer now, and the ground under Harlan's feet seemed to tilt as men on small, tough horses came out of the white like teeth in a mouth. Harlan's last thought before the first charge hit the cottons was simple and solid as ice. Paper was coming with hooves. "If you're watching from a cold place tonight, tell me where you are. Stay with us. When we reach the ruins under the bluff, you'll learn why Bidsy Nez never speaks his brother's real name." Cotton branches whipped as the first riders burst through. Hooves fired clods of frozen sand. A horse shouldered a willow trunk and broke it like an arm. Harlan shoved Tom behind him and drew Lark by the sleeve. Bidsy snapped a word in his language that sounded like a low drumbeat, short, shaped to cut through wind, and the gray folded onto his haunches, pivoted, and drove forward once, just enough to jam 2 of Stroud's men against the trees. The rope man's loop snagged a branch and cinched. He yelped as his own pull took him off his feet. The Iron Man swung, missed, and hit bark, sending a stink of scorched cottonwood into the snow air. "Back!" Harlan barked, and Lark moved with him. Tom clamped to her side. Bidsy didn't look behind. He made space with small angles. His mare slid light, placing feet where the snow thinned. The gray took the narrowest path and turned his shoulder like a door shutting. Stroud held at the edge of the tangle, letting his men eat the branches. He knew how to stay clean. He tipped his hat against the snow with 2 fingers and watched Harlan and Bidsy break away along the low wash. They ran bent. The wind hunted. The wash curved east, then north. In the blur of white and bark, landmarks went thin. A dead piñon like a lifted hand, a kneeling boulder, a jag of basalt that caught snow on its dark lip. Bidsy cut left at the dead piñon, up a deer track masked by drift. The track posted through scrub in a tight S under a short bluff. He slid out of the saddle and ran beside the mare, taking her rein low so his pull would not tip her. "Here," he breathed. Harlan saw it then. An old shelter under the lip of stone, half-walled with packed earth and logs long gone to gray. Not a hogan now, just the memory of one where wind could jump the top instead of crawling in. Dry sand lay in a shallow bowl. Brush lay stacked in a shape that said someone used this place sometimes, but not long. Snow blew past the mouth and spilled like flour, but inside, air held still. "Go," Bidsy said to Lark. "Hands to the boy's back. Keep him low." They dropped into the bowl. The storm's howl dulled to a high hiss. The gray slid last, planted, and stood, head up. Harlan saw tracks where coyotes had come, and smelled where someone had burned juniper last week. He saw a strip of shredded yucca cordage tied under a stone, dry. He saw, too, along the back wall, scratches, names once, now rubbed to bones of letters. Nothing to read, everything to say. Bidsy stacked brush at the mouth with care. A soldier gives a door. Enough to break a glance, not enough to scream hiding. "No fire," he said. "Smoke tells stories." Lark nodded. She pulled Tom close and rubbed his hands. His knuckles were purple with cold. Her own wrist, rope-rashed, had turned puffy. Harlan took off his gloves and pressed Tom's fingers in his palms. Pain bit. The boy hissed through his teeth and didn't complain. The gray turned his rump to the mouth and the storm and put his head near the boy. His warm breath touched Tom's face like a hand. "Thank you," Lark whispered to the horse, soft as a pocket secret. Outside, men moved. Sound changes after a run. All the loud parts shrink, and the small parts get big. Harlan heard tack creak. He heard breath labor. He heard Stroud's tone. Calm, clipped. He counted 2 new riders by hoofbeat before the wash swallowed the sound. The horn had been ranchmen working adrift. Storm cowboys who'd seen figures and followed. Not Strouds, not allies either. Strangers could split a night clean as a knife. "Water," Bidsy said, handing Lark a small canteen that was not his usual. Tin-dented, army issue scratched thin. He had traded or taken it, somewhere cold. Small sips, let it sit under your tongue, then swallow. Tom did as told, jaw set, face tight. Lark drank, counted, passed the canteen back without looking greedy. Harlan took the last and simply wet his mouth. The hurt of wanting more felt like truth in his throat. Outside, a horse sneezed wet. A man coughed and spit. Boots slid. Stroud's men spread along the wash and then circled, feeling wind and guesswork. Wind is dumb muscle. Men are wired different. They would look for where wind went stupid. They'd find this cut. "They'll put a man on the lip," Harlan said. "Yes," Bidsy said. "He will look from high and miss low. Men love high. Coyotes love low. Coyotes live longer," Harlan said. "Some men learn," Bidsy answered. He lifted a hand to the gray's neck, fingers pressing at the place where mane grows thick. The horse breathed steady. Bidsy took off his medicine pouch and, careful, pressed it against the gray's wither. Not a right, a touch. He tied the pouch back on with fingers that did not shake. Lark's eyes had gone searching along the back wall, as if they could dig answers from dirt. She found a little cache in a crack, a folded strip of oilcloth, brittle and cold. She looked to Bidsy. He nodded. She opened it slow. Inside lay 3 dry juniper berries, a twist of rabbit fur, and a tiny bead patch, 4 squares stitched, white and turquoise with a single red bead in the corner. Her breath caught. "It's the same hand," she said quietly, thumb rubbing the edge. "My husband's sister. She stitched like this. 4 square with a red blood bead. She said it was for breath and return." Bidsy looked and nodded once. "Dolly stitched like that," he said, a name let loose like a strand of hair. He did not say whose sister she had been. He did not place her with the dead or the living. He did not name the lost. "A sign," Harlan said, "of a path, or of a debt, of a promise," Lark said. She pressed the patch to her bead band, where a wrong color piece had always bothered her. The patch sat there, like it had waited. She let it go and her face eased, as if a muscle she'd held for months let loose. A rock grated above. Sand trickled. A man was crawling belly down to look over the lip. Harlan lifted one finger. Tom pressed himself smaller against his mother. The gray pricked both ears, then made his ears loose again, pretending to be a sleeping horse in a storm. A face slid into view. Frosted beard, red eyes from wind, nose worn raw by a scarf. He scanned and saw only brush and a rumor of shapes. He started to shift. Bidsy lifted a pebble and flicked it farther down the wash. It clicked twice against stone. The man's head turned to the sound. He moved toward it. His weight took the wrong piece of edge. Sand gave. He flailed, caught scrub, cursed. No shout. Pride kept his mouth shut. He belly-wormed back and disappeared. Stroud's voice came like a man reading a list. "We wait," he said. "Snow will cover footprints. Their choice will be to freeze or bargain. We are the warm choice." He let his men laugh a little. Not much. He fed them just enough. "Time," Harlan said, looking at the low light that was not light. "We need hours. He'll give us hours." Bidsy nodded. "They will doze. They will light a pipe under a slicker. The rope man will tie his horse to his wrist and sleep. The iron man will sleep with his clutch on the iron, like a baby with a blanket. The ledger man will write in the book," Lark said, "even when it's wet. He likes the feel of making lines." She said it with the old burn in it. Harlan did not ask about the burn scar on her arm. Not yet. Her face said the story would get told without being pushed. They took turns dozing, but not sleep. The kind where your eyes go and your ears stay. Bidsy sat against the back wall, back straight as a staff. Harlan sat by the mouth, eyes on the weave of brush where White pushed and paused. Lark slept for 10 heartbeats, then woke and checked Tom's fingers, and pressed his feet, and tucked the horse's flank blanket closer. A little throw that looked like nothing and meant heat saved. When Harlan's eyes closed, winter's memory came. The sound of a lake cracking when the sun finally touched it. A sound like a roar, bottled and poured. He saw a boy in a snow corral, watching a gray that would be a war horse someday. He woke with the taste of iron on his tongue. That was not blood. It was regret. Bidsy's gaze had gone to the notch leather again. He held it flat on his palm, thumb on the cut lines. "My brother," he said, not lifting his eyes, "was named Kinna. He offered the name the way a man offers water. He taught me to make a horse stop with just breath. He told me never to shout at a horse unless I wanted a horse that only hears shouting. He rode this gray into a storm like this one for the last time. He told me one line before he went." Bidsy's mouth tightened. He said, "If I do not return, do not speak my name where wind can hear it." I did not. I kept him close and quiet. Tonight I speak it because truth is a kind of fire, and we are cold. Harlan nodded once, gratitude and gravity in it. Lark's eyes filled and emptied with a blink. Tom traced the notch with one finger. "It looks like a fence with a broken post," he whispered. "It looks like a doorway." Lark whispered back. "A way in that paper can't close." A hinge of wind shifted. The storm eased for a breath, then bit again. The kind of shift that says the back half is heavier. Stroud would feel that. He would push before the worst of the back half, or he would button his men up to wait it out. "We move before they think to move," Bidsy said softly. "We slip under their sleep. We ride small, not fast. We step like foxes. We leave no word behind that can be read by a boot heel." "La Culebra," Harlan said. "Trading yard. And a man there who reads brands from scars," Bidsy said. "Old Arista. He can tell a burnover from a first mark with his eyes closed. He likes truth because it lets him be important." "Will he speak for us?" Lark asked. "He will speak for himself," Bidsy said, "but his self leans close to right." They waited until the storm pressed hard again. Snow thickened. sound muffled. Harlan brushed the brush screen aside with 2 fingers. They climbed out, bent, and moved. The gray went last again, stepping like a thought tiptoeing through a house at night. The mule blew and came. The wash carried them left where men had gone right. The dead piñon watched and said nothing. The deer track took them to a ridge cut with basalt teeth. They slid along its shadow. Behind, a shout lifted, thin. A man had woken and not seen what he expected. Another shout answered and then choked. Stroud's voice culled them quiet. They walked the horses for an hour or for 5 minutes, time breaks and bends in weather. The first landmark that counted was a low fence of stacked stones, snake-writhing across snow. Old. A line men had argued over when grass was thick and rivers vain. The second was a patch of prickly pear black with frost, pads like dead hands. The third was a narrow arroyo marked by a tumble of red rock that looked like a bowl overturned. Bidsy stopped and knelt. He brushed snow with his palm. He found tracks, tiny a night before, mice. He brushed farther and found a man's step, not Stroud's boot. This was a moccasin, toe in, heel light, moving fast. Bidsy looked at Harlan. The calm in his face broke and set differently. A taut line tightened. "Who?" Harlan asked low. "Someone I know," Bidsy said. "Someone I do not want in Stroud's mouth." "He is ahead?" Lark asked. "Yes," Bidsy said. "He runs like he carries a secret in his teeth." "Friend?" Tom asked, small voice, big hope. "Blood," Bidsy said. "Not my brother. Another kind. He should not be in this storm." "Maybe he came because of the storm," Lark said. "Some men run to the hard thing to meet it standing up." They followed the moccasin track until the arroyo tightened to a slot where snow bridged overhead, making a low white roof. The wind's voice changed again, softened. Wood closet quiet. Snow hung from the roof in fangs, and the drip of melt hit sand like a clock tick. Harlan felt the weight of all that white above his head and counted the ways the roof could fail. He kept moving. If you stop under a blade, you hand it your neck. The slot opened into a pocket of sage and flat stone. Tracks here went wild. Jackrabbit, coyote, 2 sets of horse, man's boot, moccasin again, now scuffed. Blood dropped in little black coins where it hit cold stone and froze. Bidsy touched a drop and held finger to tongue. "Not long," he said. "An hour. 2. "Whose?" Harlan asked. "Not ranch cow," Bidsy said. "Man, he bit his tongue or cut his lip. He ran after." Bidsy stood and looked. He seemed taller in the small place, as if he unfolded inside. His eyes went to a notch above, a shelf with a wind-carved hole. He gestured Lark and Tom low, then crouched and climbed catfoot up the shelf. Harlan counted breaths. He placed himself to catch Lark if she slipped trying to look. She did not try. She set Tom behind a flat rock and set her body over his, like a roof a mother can make. Bidsy peered into the hole and reached in slow. He felt around with spider fingers and then drew out a folded hide. He cradled it like heat. He climbed down and held it so only their small huddle could see. Inside lay a paper, not ledger, thick, cracked at the fold corners. Ink run from a wet day, then dried into spidering. A brand sketch, a transfer note, a deed for 3 mares and a stallion, with dates and marks. 2 names scratched. One Harlan did not know. The other he knew, written in a hand that kicked at the end of letters, as if the writer hadn't learned to stop like other men. Deacon Stroud. Under the names, someone had added a line later with a different pen, different hand. Brand corrected at Arista's yard. Burnover noted. Witnessed J. Arista. A second line added lower, cramped. Ledger line voided by fire. See cross tally by Deputy Hale. The paper shook in Bidsy's hands. Not fear. Rage held still so it would not spill. Lark's breath came sharp. Where did this come from? Her voice stayed down. but could not be flat, from someone who meant to hide it until he could bring it to someone who would not burn it, Bidsey said. He turned the paper, soft as cloth now, and squinted. Date is last spring, before your husband died. He looked at Lark. He knew, he said, not as a blame, as a deep sadness. Lark's mouth opened and shut. Her eyes went away, and then came back. He knew Stroud's men rebranded, she said. He knew the horse's marks were lies. She touched the corner where J. Arista had written. He meant to ride to La Culebra. He meant to fix it. He did not get there. She swallowed and forced a breath to come softer. I am glad I did not burn his letters in anger. Harlan held the paper just long enough to feel its truth. Weight and cheap rag smell, and the way ink sits in a wet day, tells you more than what the words say. He wanted to shout, to climb a rock and throw the paper at Stroud's face. That was the first want. The second want was smarter. Hide the paper again. Place a false one in its place. Let Stroud think he had killed it. Surprises hurt men like Stroud more than arguments. Who hid it? Harlan asked. Bidsey slid a finger along the hide's seam. A small bead caught his nail. White shell. 4 square with a red bead, wrong placed. A crooked corner. Bidsey exhaled through his nose. Who? Harlan said again, softer. My cousin, Bidsey said. Pavi. He runs. Between places men no longer look. He likes every road and trusts none. He would put a paper in a rock's mouth and tell no one, not even me, until it mattered. It matters. So he's hurt, Lark said. He bleeds from the mouth. He is too proud to spit where anyone can step in it. He runs, so that I will not see his tracks unless I need to, Bidsey said, and the hard tenderness in his voice cut Harlan more than any iron could. A shout snapped the air back to thin. Men. Not Stroud's tone. Ranch hands arguing with themselves about following tracks in a storm. One voice, high, angry, wanted to be hero. Another, low, chewing words slow, wanted to be smart. They would turn or come. If they came, they would push Stroud's hunt harder, even if they did not mean to. We go, Harlan said. They went. Paper folded into hide, hide tucked under Harlan's coat, under 3 layers, where warmth might keep ink from shattering. The notch leather stayed with Bidsey. Lark held Tom's hand so hard he smiled a little, because being held that tight told him he mattered. They cut the arroyo until a slot lay plugged by snow. Bidsey tested the side. Sand crumbled. Not safe. He led them up the wall onto a flat where greasewood dotted like small tombstones. The wind did the rest. It came back big, pushing, making eyelids heavy with ice. The gray snorted and shook his head, and then lowered his chin to plow. The mule went sideways twice, fought the pull of wind, then leaned into it as if anger made him heavier. Tracks shifted under snow. Stroud's men spread like ink under water, showing and then blurring, showing and then gone. The ranch hands turned south, their horn lost to the west with a last morn note. The land swallowed that sound and replaced it with a different one, a low drum thud, not hooves. Harlan felt it in his feet. He glanced at Bidsey. Snowslide, Bidsey said. Not above us. Somewhere east. The ridge took a breath and let go. We walk the flats. We do not trust slopes. They chose flats, which cost time and skin to wind. The sky turned from lead to iron. The thin part of day came and went, and left the same gray as before. Snow carried cold into their bones, where it would sit and talk at night. The kind of cold you could only pay down by hours in front of heat. They did not have hours. They had a promise and a paper. Near dusk that isn't dusk, they found a fence line swallowed to the top wire. The wire sang in wind. A gate hung by one pin and beat itself sick. On the post, someone had cut a brand with a knife and then scratched through it with another. Double V overcut by a cross. A man's little war. Harlan pushed the gate to quiet it. Quiet matters. Quiet keeps a thing alive longer than loud, when loud brings wolves. Past the gate lay a ruin of a line camp. 2 walls standing, a stove tipped, a bunk broken. Harlan's eyes went to the stove, and then away. Fire calls men, and tells them what you have left. Bidsy's eyes went to the floor. He caught Lark's sleeve before she stepped. Snare, he said, pointing at a loop of wire under drift. Lark blinked. Tom's lip curled like he wanted to spit. Bidsy set his boot and crushed the wire. Men snare men, he said, and not like it surprised him. They pushed on. Evening's lie told bodies to stop. Stopping was a comfort that would kill. Bidsy kept a pace that was less than a run and more than a walk. A soldier's march. Lark matched it. Harlan matched it because they did. Tom matched it because his mother's hand told him to. The mule matched it because everyone else did, and even mules can be infected by duty if you ask them right. Night deepened without getting darker. Cold grew teeth longer than before, the kind of cold that quiets arguments inside. Past a low bluff, a stand of juniper bent like old men. Bidsy angled in. Under one, sheltered where 3 trunks met, snow lay thin. The ground there had been disturbed a day ago. He knelt, brushed. A small fire had burned there, no ash in drift. Someone had scattered it with a gloved hand. 2 small bones lay, rabbit ribs, cracked clean for marrow. He touched the ribs, nostrils flaring like a coyote, then nodded. Pavi, he said. He ate. He hid his eat like a fox. He left a sign for me where only my eyes would put it together. Bidsy reached under the trunk where bark peels and found a scrap of blue cloth tied with yucca fiber. He smelled it, then let it go. Juniper smoke on it. He wanted to tell me he burnt, without telling men it was here. Where is he now? Tom asked, shy but sure. North, Bidsy said. To the spill flats. He will cut across a frozen playa to make time if he is proud. He is proud. He will go light and carry his mouth tight against bleeding. He will do too much. I will be angry with him. And then I will hold his neck and take that anger out of my mouth. Lark set her hand on Bidsy's arm. One quick press. We'll find him, she said. A shadow swung out of the snow then, quick and close, and hit the mule's rump. The mule kicked, connecting with a man's thigh. He grunted and went down to his knee. Rope flicked, but not from behind, from the side. Harlan raised his arm, and the loop slid across his sleeve, burned a stripe, and fell. Bidsy's mare sidestepped and came up behind the man. A second shadow slid to the left. Stroud's voice didn't come. Good. This wasn't Stroud. It was 2 of his trash fish, men who think the quiet shape of storm makes them wolves. Harlan stepped into the first man's space and moved his weight to ruin the rope throw. They hit shoulder to shoulder. The man smelled of rancid tallow and wet wool. Harlan let his knee find the man's thigh, where the mule had softened it. The man coughed a word that isn't said around women, and dropped the rope to grab his leg. Bidsy took his wrist, turned it, put the hand in the snow, and pushed a second longer than it took to make pain. The second man flicked iron hidden in his coat and reached for Lark, as if she were a sack to sling. The gray moved before Harlan did. He planted, half-reared, and struck the second man's forearm with his knee. Bone cracked like a stick. The iron hit the ground and disappeared in drift. The man screamed and then stifled it because he had a sliver of pride. He bent to pick up the iron with his left. Tom kicked his hand, not hard enough to break, hard enough to say no. Lark's fist arrived a half-beat later, small but angry, catching his temple. He saw white snow, and then a private black. Don't kill, Bidsy said suddenly, tone like stone. Not here, not for them. Harlan kept his fist and feet, but took the man into the snow, and let the cold do what justice could not. He tied both with their own rope around a juniper trunk, hands high enough to hurt and low enough not to rip. He took their matches and their tobacco, and left them a small piece of jerky, because he did not want the cold to take all blame. He slid their iron under the snow, in a place where pulling it would ring on stone. "If Stroud finds you," he said low, "tell him his ledger is running ink in the wrong direction." They moved while men moaned, and the juniper watched. Bidsy's face had gone more still than before. He had a thread of blood at his hairline he had not felt. Lark reached and wiped it with her thumb. He blinked and then nodded, the kind of thanks you give when you're moving too fast to stop. The land softened ahead in a way that is dangerous. It looked easy, a wide white, flat. The playa Bidsy had named. Snow laid over ice laid over mud. The wind watched for fools. "Step where the sage tips show," Bidsy said. "If you see nothing, you poke with a stick." They found sticks and poked. The first 10 yards held. The 11th gave a groan. The 12th sang like a wineglass. They angled to crust thicker, a gray smear where dust had settled before snow. Halfway across, a shape rose from white on the far edge and lowered again, then rose and waved one arm slow. A man. He did not call out, proud or smart or both. "Pavi," Bidsy breathed. He did not run. He held. He waits where the shore is true. They went the way he pointed. 2 steps safe, 1 tested. The gray lifted each foot and set it like his mind was a hand under the ice. The mule slipped once and sat like a dog, then got up ashamed. Lark and Tom moved together like they had practiced walking on knives. They reached the far side and snow became sand under their boots. The man stood from the sage, face gaunt, lips split. A scarf wrapped his mouth red. His eyes were like Bidsy's eyes, but younger and still angled with boy fire. "Cousin," Pavi said, voice shredded. He lifted his palm. Bidsy pressed his to it. No hug. Not yet. The storm would not allow luxuries. "You hid paper in a rock's mouth," Bidsy said. "I did," Pavi said. "I put it where men who read ledgers do not look." "Men who burn ledgers look everywhere," Lark said, and Pavi's eyes went to her, and then to Tom, and then to the gray. His jaw worked. Pride and relief wrestled hard. "They killed a deputy at La Culebra," Pavi said. He said it like he had not planned to say anything, and the words kicked out of him. "Hale. Shot him in the yard by the hitch. They said he was drunk and fell and his gun went off. The blood said he was shot twice and fell once." The wind stung the inside of Harlan's nose. "Hale signed the void line," he said. "He wrote what burned. He told me to run the paper to you," Pavi said to Bidsy. "He said he would meet me after he wrote in the big book in the back. He did not come. I heard the shot. I saw Stroud turn his face away like last year's miss. I ran. I did not go home. I did not say names. I put the paper in a place only a reckoner would think to look." He swayed. The scarf went darker. "Sit," Bidsy said, the command wrapped in love. "My water, little. Lark's food, little. My anger, none." That almost smile flickered and died. He knelt and pushed Pavi's shoulder down gentle. He unwound the scarf. The cut in Pavi's lip had frozen to cloth. It tore and bled again. Pavi hissed, and then turned his head to spit dark into sand where no one would step. Lark took a strip of clean cloth from under her dress and pressed it to the lip. She didn't ask. Pavi let her, which told Harlan more about Pavi than anything else could. "Stroud rode east," Pavi said through cloth. "He told his rope man, 'The Dene will run the flats. We will make a page that says Wind did it.' He has 6 men with him, and 2 more behind. The ledger man keeps his book under his coat, like a baby." "What about Arista?" Harlan asked. "He lives," Pavi said. "He keeps his yard. Men still bring colts to show him, because storms pass and horses remain. He does not choose fights, but he likes to be the man who is asked." "We will ask him," Bidsy said. Pavi shook his head once. You cannot reach La Culebra before daylight. Stroud will catch you in the saltgrass flats. He will take the gray and the woman and make the boy hold iron. He will make a line in his book while he watches the woman read it. He is proud of his pen. Harlan looked across the white, to the low black thread that was Cotton's thin as hair at this distance. He did not see a path. Paths hide in storms and show in stories later. He tasted iron again, the regret taste, and swallowed it like medicine. We need a witness before we reach Arista, Lark said. Something Stroud cannot burn if Arista isn't there to speak. Tracks, Bidsy said. Brand scars, knots, things that do not burn, because they are not on paper. Where? Lark asked. On the gray, Bidsy said, and his eyes cut to the horse like a man looks at a friend he has asked everything from and will ask more. He ran, his hand under the saddle again, and felt for that old line where army had stamped and men had burned over. He found a ridge of skin under the hair on the hip, the place where heat had once turned, hide to memory. He scraped snow from it with a thumb. He spat on his thumb and rubbed. The gray stood. He did not kick or flinch. He looked at the horizon as if he expected a different horse to appear and share the joke. Bidsy rubbed until hair parted to a pale scar. The double V lay there ghosted, and something under it lay there brighter. A small crescent cut with a hot nail years ago. A secret men carved when brands lied. A family mark. 2 short lines, and 1 long. The notch that matched the leather in Bidsy's hand. The brand over had not covered the crescent, because a man with iron had not known to look for a nick so small a child's fingernail could hide it. Here, Bidsy said, voice soft, like laying a blanket over a sleeping child. Here is the truth, from the bone outward. Pavi leaned and smiled with hurt in it. Kinna thought of that, he said. Name a gift and a cut. He said brands lie, but scars turn their faces to men who know how to read them. Arista will know, Harlan said. Stroud will pretend not to, Lark said. He will say the crescent is a crack in skin. He will float words like lawyers float logs on water to build a bridge where there isn't a crossing. Then we give him a place he cannot float, Bidsy said. Rock that does not move. The bluff? Harlan asked. Better, Pavi said. He pointed west where the playa ended, and hummocks of calcium curled like bleached waves. There is a spring that eats stone. It makes tufa. It lays layers like books. Men pressed brands there once to prove a calf was theirs. The stone took the mark and held it. Kinna and I pressed the crescent there when we were boys, playing not playing. We laughed because no one would read it but us. We were wrong. We will make Stroud read. Hope is a wild animal. It runs before you can catch it. Harlan grabbed his by the tail and held it. Can we reach the spring before Stroud? If we walk without rest and do not fall through the paper-thin places, Bidsy said. Yes. If we slip, Lark said, looking at Tom. We drown in water so cold it feels like heat. Then we do not slip, Harlan said. We step only where the land lets us. They moved again. The gray handed them courage by the way he put his feet down. Pavi walked with a little stagger until the cloth held his lip tight and the blood slowed. He muttered to himself, calling winter names in his own tongue that sounded like rocks being rubbed together. Bidsy checked the sky. Colorless, still mean. The storm had hours left. The spring was not a place anyone would choose in summer. It stank a cold mineral stink that cut nose hairs. It burbled through rock tubes and laid a crust as it went, calcifying twigs and leaves, and, once, long ago, a mouse that had wandered in and become stone. In storm, steam lifted and turned to lace, then to knives. The ground near it caved where crust couldn't take weight. The only safe places were stone shelves that had grown for 100 small years into ridges. Pavi pointed at a curved slab that reached like a tongue over a pool. There, he said. The surface was smooth as a page and pocked with old marks. Men had pressed irons there to show off. Boys had pressed sticks like swords. In the middle, faint from old time, lay a crescent notch that looked like a smile gone thin. Kinna, Bidsey said, the name like breath you let out slow, so you don't get dizzy. Voices carried on wind then. Stroud's men, closer than Harlan wanted. The rope man had his rope again. They heard it hiss and tick. The ledger man had his book. They heard the flap of oilskin in wind like a bird that can't find a branch. Do it, Harlan said. Bidsey pulled the small strip of notch leather from his pocket. He set it on the stone above the crescent in a way that marked direction. He took the gray's rein and led him so that the horse's flank came near the stone. He pressed his hand against the hip scar and then pressed it against the old crescent mark on the stone, transferring warmth and wet. The old notch in hide turned the exact shape that lay in the stone. Harlan felt the hair raise on his arms, though the cold had killed hair hours ago. Lark, Bidsey said, and held out his knife. Cut 3 hairs from the gray's tail. His voice held no ceremony. It held a mechanic's purpose. She cut. He laid the hairs in the wet print. He spoke, for Harlan and Lark to hear. We do not make a right. We make proof. Hair, scar, stone. No paper. Pavi stood up straight and faced the white where Stroud would come. He didn't look at the Iron Man or the Rope Man, or even at the ledger. He looked at the place where Deacon Stroud's eyes would appear and meet his. He rolled his shoulders back and lifted his chin like a young man meeting a hall full of graybeards. Stroud came neat as a pen stroke. He wore his slicker open to show he was warm enough to not need the extra. Snow tattooed his hat brim. He smiled just enough to say he had not gotten wet doing work, and other men had. His 3 pushed wide and 3 more fanned behind. He had 8. Harlan counted without staring. Stroud let his eyes slide over Lark like she was a bench, over Tom like he was a nail in a plank, over Harlan like he was a wall with no door. He let them stop on the gray. Bring him, he said, to Harlan, as if to a stable boy. No, Bidsey said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't knife a word to make it sharper. He just said the thing that was true and let it stand. Stroud looked at Bidsey, the way a banker looks at a man who does not count his coins the right way. Your brother died over that horse, he said. I remember tales. Tales are free. Horses are not. Books burn, Lark said, and Stroud's eyes flicked like a man swatting a fly that flies only for him. Look, Bidsey said, and he moved his hand without haste to the stone slab. He did not touch his knife. He did not touch rope. He touched stone. He pointed at the crescent old mark. He pointed at the wet print he had made from scar and hand. He pointed at the 3 hairs laid in the wet like small black commas, telling a reader where to breathe. Read, he said, from the bone outward. Stroud did not move. He did not give them the courtesy of a lean. He had a ledger man for seeing. He nodded at him. The ledger man slogged, bent, checked footing, came to the slab, squinted, sniffed like a dog who wanted attention, and finally said, A mark. Which? Harlan asked. Crescent, the ledger man said. Small, old, underlies another, double V later. Harlan looked at Stroud and watched the pivot. It's a thing a man can't hide, even if he's good, when a mind turns and starts to sell a new story. Stroud shifted the weight of his pride from one foot to the other and flashed his gold tooth half a second too soon. Boys make marks everywhere, Stroud said. Somebody's fun years ago. Doesn't make a horse his. Paper makes a horse his. He lifted his book a little and patted it, like a dog. Pavi laughed once, soft and clean, because sometimes you can't not. You have Deputy Hale's cross tally? Harlan said, voice mild like a winter sun that won't do a field any good. The one that voided the burned line? The one where you had to borrow a pen from the feed store, because yours wouldn't make ink on a wet day. Stroud's jaw worked. Men die, he said. Men get killed, Lark said. Paper helps. The rope man's wrist twitched. He wanted to throw. The Iron Man's hand hovered near his sack, like he wanted warmth from it. Arista will read it, Bidsy said. If you're so certain, we all ride. He tells it. We listen. No, Stroud said. And now the warmth had gone, and only the penstroke neat remained. We settle here. I have 8. You have 2 and a mule. The woman and boy are ledgers by another name. I have rope and iron and page. He tipped his head. Give me the horse. I let you walk. No one takes a widow by trade. Bidsy said softly, his vow line again, the same line he had said when Harlan gave him the rein. Stroud looked at the gray one last time, like a man looks at a painting he can't buy. He blinked, and his eyelids showed the only crack he owned. Take them, he said. The rope flew, clean this time, low and hard for Lark's waist. Harlan stepped into it and let it hit his shoulder instead. It bit. He grabbed and rolled, and the rope burned his palm. Bidsy moved for the Iron Man, whose sack hand had finally risen. The gray came between Lark and a second rope, planted, and shoved a man off his feet with his chest. Tom dove under, the slab as if he had been born in storms. Pavi swung and took the ledger man's elbow with a stone like a hammer. The ledger flew like a black bird and landed in slush, open, pages sponging wet. Stroud cursed for the first time that night, not at the lost page, but at the loss of face. He moved in then, too clean, too neat, pulling a short-barreled pistol from under his slicker. He aimed not like a drunk or a ranch hand, but like a man who had practiced on men. He aimed at Harlan's chest. Harlan saw the barrel and the small black mouth of death, and had time for one thought. Not me. Tom. He turned sideways to make himself small and prepared to take it in meat that might live. The gun cracked. Wind tore the sound. Harlan didn't feel fire. Stroud jerked. He looked astonished the way men do when math is wrong. He turned and looked down at his own leg, where the calf had bloomed black and red. He looked up. Pavi held the pistol he had taken from the Iron Man when the mule had kicked him. Pavi's hand shook. He had shot low on purpose or because Winter had moved his aim. Stroud bared his teeth. Not the gold one, the wolf ones. Now we finish, he hissed. 8 men made a half circle. The slab steamed. The spring burbled. The storm leaned in as if it belonged to Stroud or to Bidsy or to no one at all. The ledger lay on its back like a turtle in slush, open, ink bleeding lines into bruise blue fans. The small crescent in stone shone with wet. Back to the slab, Bidsy said to Harlan, to Lark, to Tom. Rock that does not move. He stepped to meet Stroud, not running, not slow. The way a man meets a horse who believes he is the only thing that matters, quiet and certain and full of another idea. The rope hissed. The iron flared. The pistol spoke again. The gray rose like a winter god. And under all that, a new sound came. Men riding fast, hooves chipping ice. Not Stroud's, not ranch hands. A bell hit once. A man's voice called, old and cracked, carrying like a crow's cry over a graveyard. Hold your iron or I'll take it for taxes, he barked. By the county's word and my own, I'll fine you in horses you can't cover. Arista. Old and liking to be asked. He had come with 2 deputies with scarves over their faces and their badges tucked inside their coats to not be foolish. He had come because storms pass, but a man's name sits with him. He had come because Hale had died with his eyes open. Stroud didn't drop his gun. He smiled with his gold tooth and the corner of his mouth, and he turned his pistol toward the voice of law. Arista's deputy fired first. The shot took Stroud's hat. It cut a path through felt and hair and winter pride, and left the man alive, angrier. Stroud fired back and hit a horse that screamed like a hinge tearing loose. The horse went down. The deputy rolled, saved by Snow. Chaos took order and shook it until names fell out. Harlan grabbed Tom and shoved him flat against stone hard, as a table. Lark flattened her boy and covered his head with both arms, body curved like a question thrown at God. Bidsy moved to cut Stroud's angle and take his eye. Pavi slid to the ledger and slammed it shut with both hands, then stuffed it under the slab edge where slush met stone, half in water, half in earth, like a burial, to confuse even a careful reader. "Bidsy," Harlan shouted. He didn't finish. His boot slid to ice. He found footing with blind faith in his heel. Stroud's iron barked again and spat flame. The gray flinched and then drove forward, shoulder into Stroud's chest. Stroud went backward with a sound like a curse bit in half. The spring's crust near the slab, thin from heat and heavy from snow, cracked in a long sigh. The slab tilted. "Move." Bidsy slammed his palm into Harlan's chest and took Lark's elbow with his other hand. The slab slid half an inch, and then another, and then an inch more. The ledger under it moved with the water kiss. "Tom!" Lark yelled. "I've got him," Harlan said, and he did. Boy under one arm, Gray's rein in the other, both pulling against gravity's grin. Pavi lunged for the ledger and got it with his fingertips. He held it like a man holding a snake behind the head. The slab dropped another inch and bit his knuckles. He grunted and did not let go. Stroud crawled on his side, gun clenched, eyes up and gold tooth gritted. He aimed at Pavi's ribs, as if the ledger and the man attached were both coins he could spend. Bidsy stepped between, broadside to the gun, eyes on Stroud's eyes. Not a brave man's theater, a horseman's little angle. He held the notch leather up like a small dull star. "You cannot burn this," he said, and he didn't shout it. He said it like a line of a ledger that could not be erased. Stroud fired. The pistol barked. Bidsy staggered. The bullet shaved his coat and bit meat along his ribs. He made a sound like a horse breath driven wrong and kept his feet. The slab groaned again. Water boiled cold over its lip and turned to lace where wind kissed it. Pavi's fingers crushed the ledger spine. Harlan hauled Tom clear with a jerk that lit fire across his back. Lark's hands were on the boy's skull, a roof that didn't leak. Arista leaned from his saddle and cracked his voice like a whip. "Iron down, hands high." His deputy rose from Snow, face gray, eyes flint. He fired at the ropeman's loop and cut it in the air. The loop fell dead, a snake with its head broken. The Iron Man's sack slipped, and the iron slid into slush, hissed, and went dumb. Stroud crawled crabwise toward clean footing. He lifted his gun, not at Stone now, but at Pavi's face. Harlan was too far. Bidsy was too hurt. The gray moved again. No war trumpet, no hero rear. He simply stepped his weight to pin Stroud's wrist with his knee. Calm and final. Stroud snarled. He yanked. The pistol cracked once into mud and through a weak fountain. "Hold," Bidsy whispered, hand on the gray's wither, though the horse was already holding. Blood wet Bidsy's shirt. He didn't look at it. He looked at Pavi. "Keep the book." "I have it," Pavi said, and his mouth bled new for saying it too hard. He slid the ledger onto dry stone and held it with his palm like a heart he had stolen back. Arista's second deputy came around the spring on the safe side, cutting a smart line. He raised both open hands to show he wasn't aiming at strangers. "Put it away, Deacon," he called. "We're done writing tonight." Stroud lifted his chin, pride trying to sit up when body wanted to lie. "You carry Hale's badge?" he said, slick with hate. The deputy touched his coat, where a shape sat against cloth. "I carry mine," he said. "Hale's is home." Stroud looked at Snow, at Stone, at the gray's knee holding his wrist, like a page pressed flat. He did the math and found he couldn't bully it. He let the pistol go. It slid into a seam in the crust and was gone like a lie swallowed. Arista dismounted Old Man careful and walked to the slab. He bent at the waist, sleeves steaming, hat brim white. He looked at the crescent in rock. He looked at the wet print made by hand and scar. He looked at the 3 tail hairs laid in the shape of breath. He did not touch any of it. His mouth went crooked, not to smile, because Kraft recognized Kraft. He straightened. "I see it," he said. "Old Mark under new. Boys' work made before men fought. Scar reads true. Press reads true. Ledger reads later." He jerked his chin at Pavi. "Bring the book." Pavi carried the ledger like a live thing. He handed it to Arista and let his fingers stick a second, not wanting to lose it. Arista took it and opened where water had bled lines into blue rivers. Some words had drowned. Enough had learned to swim. He found a page where a line had been written, then scratched, then seared by heat. He squinted. He said. Deputy Hale voided Stroud's tally, Harlan said, voice even. "Hale's dead." "I heard," Arista said, and the sound he made was not grief and not nothing. It was a small weight set down in the right place. La Culebra Yard has ears. He looked at Stroud. "You made a mess your pen can't mop." Stroud's lip curled. "You think a boy's scratch in stone outranks county paper?" His breath made a white tooth of cloud. "You puff your chest with law in a storm because horses can't outrun you on ice." Arista kept his eyes on the slab. "This isn't about outrunning," he said. "It's about reading." He put a dry finger 2 inches above the crescent and didn't drop it. Every mark made by iron burns different. You can smell the draw. You can feel the bubble under hair. You can watch how a scar grows. Stone lies less than men. This stone has told me the same story for 40 winters. He turned his head to Bidsy. Kinna pressed that crescent. "Here is a boy, didn't he?" Bidsy took breath slow. He didn't look at Stroud when he said the name. He didn't look at the deputies. He kept his eyes on the place where the gray's breath fogged the cold. "He did," he said. Arista nodded once, as if he and Truth had shaken hands again. He closed the ledger gentle, like it would break if he hurried. Then his face hardened to old wood. "Deacon Stroud," he said, "I'll take your gun, your men's irons, your roping stock, and your pride for a night. By morning I'll take your horses and your paper to town. You'll stand while we read what's left. If the cross tally holds, your brand work is fraud, and your debt book's a liar. If Hale's ink can't stand, the stone and scar will." "You talk a long time to say you plan to steal from me," Stroud said, and his smile came back, wrong and shiny. "But you came with 2 boys and a bell. You think I can't write on snow?" Arista flicked his eyes to his deputies. "If Deacon Stroud reaches for iron tonight," he said, "kill his hand and leave him the rest." He looked back to Stroud. "I came because a man died under my nose. I don't care about your gold tooth. I care about the way wind tells a story when the wrong men make a page." He pointed with his chin at the spring. "One more shot and the slab goes. We lose proof to water and you walk fat. Or we stop here and march slow and get winter to hold still till daylight. I like daylight. Silence balanced on the rim of things. Snow hissed. Someone's teeth clicked. Maybe Tom's. Maybe the rope man's. Lark's breath moved steady now, disciplined, the way a nurse will breathe, so a wounded man will copy it. Harlan could feel the back half of the storm sliding toward its end, a heavy animal finally willing to sleep. Stroud did what pride does when it can't climb. He slumped into another shape. "Fine," he said, and lifted his empty hands. "We'll let old men look at scratches in rock." He turned his head to the Iron Man. "Pick up the iron," he said. The Iron Man flinched and didn't move. Stroud's mouth curled. "After the law leaves," he added. Arista's deputy grunted. "You'll be leaving with us, Stroud. You and your friend there with the wet sack." They moved, not fast. Snow had turned every foot into a question. Arista put one deputy ahead and one behind. He had Pavi carry nothing but the ledger and his own mouth. He had Bidsey ride the gray, because a man hit in the ribs can walk all night and then fall at dawn. He did not plan to let that happen. Harlan led the mare and watched Lark and Tom between breaths like a metronome. Stroud walked with his men tight, pride acting like heat in a cold that eats pride first. The march used up the dark. The back half of the storm spent itself on nothing and everything. Fence posts rose like old teeth. A line shack showed as a shadow, then a shape, then a hole in a wall where somebody had taken boards for a coffin once and never put new wood back. Arista stopped there long enough to bind Bidsey's ribs with clean cloth torn from his own shirt. He did it with hands that had bound more men than he liked to remember. "You'll walk like a stiff for a week," he said. "You'll breathe like a man with a joke he can't tell." Bidsey blinked thanks. Tom fell asleep walking. Lark tied his wrist to hers with a strip of her dress, so if he fell, he would pull her and both would wake. Harlan watched that with a look that was not love and was love anyway. They reached La Culebra as the storm loosened its fingers and let morning come pale and thin. The yard was ugly and honest. Pens, posts, a ring of black hoof chips like iron filings around a forge, a long shed with one whole side open to show headstalls, hammers, and a big table with a plank scar cut into it so deep you could lay a coin there, and it wouldn't shake out when men banged. Old Arista moved like a man who had been carved there with his tools. He took the ledger and set it on a warm stove, not to dry it out, but to keep the wet from freezing and tearing pages, as if the book itself were a wounded thing that needed gentle heat. Men gathered like crows do when somebody starts a story. Ranch hands who had slept under their saddles came to see. A woman with a baby on her hip stood in the shed's back and didn't blink. A boy with hair cut crooked leaned on the fence and tried to look older than he was. The ring filled with eyes. Arista made a circle with his hand. "No one talks," he said. "I read. Then the stone reads." He set the ledger where anyone could see if they were honest and near enough, and he opened Deputy Hale's page. The bleed lines were bad, but under blue bruises, words sat like river stones you can still step on when water is high. Arista read. Brand corrected at Arista's yard. Burn over noted. Witnessed J. Arista. He slid his finger lower. Ledger line voided by fire. C cross tally by Deputy Hale. He lifted his head, and his eyes went to Stroud. He didn't say liar. He didn't need to. The yard said it for him with silence. Stroud's jaw worked. "Your dead drunk wrote his own myth," he said. "You've got boys pressing pictures in stone like chalk. Bring the gray," Arista said. Bidsey led him in. The gray's breath made two small clouds, even now, even after everything. Arista ran his hand along hip hair backward. He lifted hair, looked with eyes that had read Brands longer than some men had been alive. He found the ghost of Double V. He found the crescent under it. He did not smile. He looked up. "Notches there," he said. "Not a crack, not a scurf, not a run of hair. A mark put where only a maker would put it." He walked to the table and set down a small box. Inside lay iron stamps, no bigger than a thumb, shapes a boy would love, a sheriff would ignore. He lifted the crescent and held it out. "Whose?" he asked. Bidsey reached but didn't take it. His eyes softened. "Kinna's," he said. And he said the Christian name that had sat on the Army's roll, not the name only family used. The paper name, he added, for the yard, for the law, for the storm that had ears. He did not speak the name his mother had given his brother under a cedar. He would not. Lark watched his face and understood without teaching. Harlan did too. Arista nodded. Then the stone reads and the scar reads and the ledger reads and the county reads, he said. He turned to Stroud. "You're a man who writes lines that pay you. I'm a man who reads lines that don't. Today, reading wins. A murmur like wind in wheat went through the watchers. Not a cheer. Men out here did not spend cheers on anything that could still break. Arista tapped the ledger with his knuckle. "Deacon Stroud," he said, "I arrest you for fraud by brand, and for the murder of Deputy Hale." The word murder fell into the yard like a stone into a well. "Your men can stand or run. Running will make me hungry. Standing will make me busy. Decide." The rope man lifted his hands. Rope still looped around one wrist, like a memory. He let it drop. The Iron Man held his sack up like a flag, and then put it down, because a sack isn't a flag, and this wasn't his army. 2, 3 of Stroud's riders took one slow step back, and then another the same speed, and it meant yes both times. Stroud's eyes went narrow. He looked smaller with the storm gone. He tried one last thing. Pride always tries a last thing. "The widow is mine by debt," he said, pointing his chin at Lark, as if men were coins and women were ledgers you tallied with your mouth. "No," Arista said. He didn't look at Lark when he said it. He didn't need to. He looked at Tom, at the boy's blue-knuckled hands, and the way his chin stayed up. "No person is written that way in this county." Lark's shoulders lowered a finger's width. Harlan felt something in his chest uncoil. Not the whole knot. Enough to breathe without breaking ribs. "Price," Arista said then, turning to Harlan, to Bidsy, to Pavi. "Stories owe price. Law takes one. Winter takes one. Choose yours or it will choose you." Bidsy looked at the gray and then at Harlan. He held out the rein and did not smile. "I chose in the storm," Harlan said. He took his hand off the rein and let it fall. "He goes with his family." The words cost him. You could hear the coin hit wood. The gray turned his head and blew on Harlan's neck. And Harlan didn't blink, because if he blinked, he'd do it too long. Bidsy accepted the rein with the gravest kind of joy. The kind that knows joy can carry grief and stay standing. He set his palm flat on the gray's neck. "We will say you by the mark only," he murmured. "We will not say your old soldier name." That was paper. Pavi leaned against the table, lip bound, ledger on, the warm stove to keep it safe until a lock and a dry room could take it. His hand trembled. Lark reached without asking and touched his elbow. He stilled. Arista's deputies took Stroud. They tied his wrists with leather that wouldn't bite, and put his hands high on the lid rope, so he'd walk looking at his feet. Men walk humbler that way. The gold tooth flashed when he spat, and hit his own boot. He walked. Pride kept him tall. The yard kept him quiet. The watchers drifted to chores, because chores don't wait. A woman with the baby touched Lark's sleeve as she passed, and left a small packet of something wrapped in cloth, comfrey root and a sliver of lard, medicine that knows ribs and lips. Lark bowed her head once. "Thank you," she said, and the woman nodded because words were extra when work was so loud. Arista stamped his feet and blew on his fingers. "You can bed the boy in the tack room," he told Lark. "Heat's sorry, but it's heat." He pointed at Harlan. "You'll guard the book with your back. If it goes missing, I'll nail your shadow to my door." It was a joke that wasn't a joke. Harlan smiled without teeth. "I've got a back," he said. "See that you keep it," Arista said. They set the night on its haunches and made the morning live. Lark wrapped Tom's feet and laid him on old horse blankets that still held summer's ghost. The boy slept like boys do after too much truth, hard and whimpering once, and then quiet as a clasp. Bidsy sat by the door with his hand on his ribs and his other hand on the gray's lead. The gray slept standing, head low, breath counting for them all. Harlan watched the ledger, and the ledger watched him. Pavi dozed with his back against the table and his hand around the knife he hadn't used because Stone had swung the heavier weight. Outside, men forked hay and cursed with relief. Outside, a bell hit twice, and then quit. Outside, Stroud's voice tried to sing a small song and died of all the cold words he had used when the storm was big. When the sun finally showed its face like a pale coin lodged in a cloud, Arista made the reading formal in front of whoever came to stand and witness. He read Hale's cross tally. He read the old mark in stone with a fingertip and a line drawn in charcoal to show the crescent's curve. He read the scar on the gray's hip, with 3 men peering and nodding like judges who do not like to agree with anyone but truth. He read the burned ledger line that said, "What had been done with heat could not be undone with snow." Then he read a last thing he had not read aloud in years. The law line that says, "You cannot buy a person with paper, even if winter is mean, and a man with a book thinks he is God." He said it plain. No one trades a widow. He wrote it again in his own book with his slow bricklayer hand. He let the ink dry where everyone could see. He stamped it with a seal he had carried for 30 winters and had only used when words needed a wall to lean on. Then he shut the county book soft, as if the new page could break if he clapped too hard. After, when men had drifted to their chores, and the yard had gone back to the kind of work truth can live inside, Lark sat on the threshold and looked at the ground like she could see spring through winter. Harlan sat beside her. He didn't talk. He didn't need to. She turned her wrist and showed him the bead band, as if he hadn't seen it a dozen times. She touched the tiny 4-square patch tucked there now, white and turquoise, and a red bead wrong placed on purpose. "I burned a page once," she said. "Not a ledger, a letter, my husband's. I was angry, and the wind was cruel, and the stove was hot. I watched the paper go to gray lace, and I thought I had burned the part of me that could be fooled. I was wrong. I was fooled again. Not today." Harlan let that sit. "We can be fooled and still stand up," he said. "Standing up counts more." She breathed out a laugh that had been waiting all night. "You gave up your horse," she said. "I gave him back," Harlan said. He looked at the gray. The horse flicked an ear like he understood English perfectly and just didn't care to use it. He wasn't mine in the way paper says. He was mine in the way walking together makes a claim. That doesn't end with a rein. They watched Bidsy stand slow and lay his palm against the gray's cheek. He spoke a line, soft as frost falling. Harlan couldn't hear it. He didn't need to. He understood the shape. Then Bidsy lifted a knife and cut a small lock of his own hair. Not all, not a right, just a piece. He tied it into the gray's mane near the notch scar. He did it without theater. He did it because memory sometimes wants something you can touch. Pavi came to the doorway with his lip bound and his eyes bright. He looked at Lark, like a brother looks at a sister he hasn't met, but has known through stories. "Kaya ha Nili," he said. "This land is yours." And he didn't mean it in paper. He meant it in the way tracks tell you where to step, and a spring shows you where not to. Arista's deputy stuck his head in and squinted at the warmth like it insulted him. "We'll cart Stroud at noon," he said. "Judge sits at 2. Weather sits whenever it pleases." "I'll ride behind," Harlan said. "You'll ride beside," the deputy answered. "He likes men who aren't scared of paper to stand where people can see." Harlan nodded. He stood and felt all the hurts at once. Winter marks you. He welcomed the marks that meant he had chosen and lived. He tied his scarf and went out where cold still had its say. On the edge of the yard, where the fence picked up a rise and the wind dropped, Bidsy stood with Tom. He was showing the boy a small trick with his tongue, a click and a breath that made the gray turn his head without rope. Tom copied and got a sound that was almost right. The gray turned his ear and pretended not to move his head, so the boy could learn without pride, eating him if he failed. Bidsy smiled with half a mouth. He put one hand on his ribs and one on the boy's shoulder. Harlan walked to them. He waited till the boy's face lit at getting the trick once. Then he looked at Bidsey. You said you'd tell me why you don't speak your brother's real name, he said. He said it like a man offers to hold something heavy for a minute, if the other man's arms hurt. Bidsey looked at the ground, where small drifts shaped words no one but wind could read. He looked at the gray's mane, where the lock of his own hair lay dark. He looked at the spring steam, still making lace in the air and turning to knives at the edges. He had a paper name, he said. The army wrote it with their mouth. They used it when they cut his mane and stamped his hip. That name sits on paper like a dead fly, useful to men who like to count. I say it when I must, for law, for yard, for storm. His real name is for my mother's house and for the inside of my chest. If I throw it to wind, men like Stroud catch it and press it in their books. They make it theirs. They don't deserve it. That is why I don't say it where wind hears. Harlan nodded. Then I won't ask again, he said. You already know what matters, Bidsey said. He patted the gray's cheek twice, and the horse blinked slow, content as a winter thing can be. Noon came thin and bright. Stroud left the yard in leather and rope, his gold tooth gone dull in gray light. He tried once to lean on his book. Arista took the ledger out of his hand before the thought finished. Pavi walked beside the mule that carried the ledger in a sack that did not hide it so much as tell men. Look, but your hands will break if you touch. Lark rode behind Harlan on the mare, Tom asleep against her, head thumping her chest with each step like a slow hammer. She watched the land the way a person watches a face after it has told the truth. Suspicious, hopeful, wary. They crossed the flats where the spring ate stone and left a library of tufa. They crossed the wash where the slab had tilted and now sat cocked, like a book left open to a good page by a careless reader. The crescent shone faint there. Wet turned to frost, turned to memory. Men on the rim paused their chores to watch a man in rope and a horse with winter in his breath pass like a page turning. At the county seat, the judge's mouth made law sounds that were dry and careful. Men spoke sworn and not. Arista held up the ledger, and the room leaned forward without meaning to. Pavi told what he saw and wept once, and bit the inside of his lip until the blood counted him back to the room. Harlan said little, because little was plenty. Lark held up her wrist and showed rope scars that healed and a bead band that did not, and she told a line about a page burning in a stove that made 2 jurors look away at their boots. Bidsey stood and did something he did not want. He spoke the paper name for Kinna in a room full of wind made from men's lungs, and leaned on an old taboo with the quiet that makes a breaking, not a shatter. He did it because to leave the room empty would have let paper win a small battle. He did not speak the other name. He did not give the room the secret. He did not need to. Truth stood without it. The judge read stone and scar and ledger and law, and found that numbers had been pushed to make men into lines on a page. He said a thing important men sometimes forget how to say, no. He said it 3 times, to the fraud, to the trade, to the murder. He set Stroud where law sets such men. He set the others free, or set them to work depending on what their hands had done. He put the ledger in the county's lock and hung the key where everyone could see it. When it was done, winter had softened. The wind's teeth had ground down to gums. Snow lay tired, ready to give itself to mud. Sun rolled like a coin you don't expect to find and did not spill. People scattered to chores because chores are the true law. Harlan stood with Bidsey by the hitch, the gray between them. Lark and Tom came and stood too. The 4 of them watched men sweep a little sand over the blood outside the door, because that's what you do when a page writes more than you asked. What now? Lark asked. It wasn't fear. It was the truth, standing in an empty room, waiting for furniture. Now, Bidsey said, we go to where spring comes early. We make a small place tight. We make a boy learn to click his tongue to a horse. We make our families not paper. We carry the ledger's page in our mouths only when it's needed. He looked at Harlan. You come? Harlan looked at the gray, and at the road, and at the place in his chest where giving up a horse had hurt and healed in the same hour. For a stretch, he said, till fence weather, till we plant something green. Lark smiled at that, small, from the middle of her face, where smiles start that last. Green, she said. They started toward the edge of town, a small knot of people not written down quite right by anyone. At the corner, a boy with a crooked haircut lifted a hand. Mister, he called to Harlan, is that a war horse? Harlan looked at the gray. The horse lifted his head as if to say only when he has to. He's a family horse, Harlan said. Best kind. The wind moved without teeth. It combed the gray's mane where a lock of Bidsy's hair tied truth to hair and hair to memory. Vultures tilted lazy over the flats, not hunting, just riding. Prairie glass gleamed along the wash like little knives put down and forgotten. Rope marks on Lark's wrists had gone the color of old smoke. The bead band shone brighter for being cold. They walked out into a land that had tried to kill them and failed, and the land watched them go, the way a tired predator watches a small herd it will not take today. They moved with winter's slowness and spring's mind. They left tracks that said, people moved here and did not sell each other when paper asked them to. If you watched this to the end, tell me where you're watching from. And when you see a small crescent cut in stone next time you're out in hard country, remember, some truths don't burn, and some names you keep out of the wind.